Dr. Patrick Kelly, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thanks so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm really pleased to have you on the show, and we're going to be talking about the book that you co-authored, and it's titled Adolescent Depression: A Guide for Parents.
Mhm.
But before we go into that, maybe you can tell us something about your own background and how you came to specialize in adolescent depression.
Sure, absolutely. I did most of my training in psychiatry in Baltimore at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. I did 3 years of adult psychiatry there. Then I did what's called fast tracking into child and adolescent psychiatry. I knew that was my interest pretty much from the get-go. And then during that time frame, I got very interested in the mood disorders of children and adolescents because we see very clear, sometimes not so clear, but usually very clear patterns in adults in what this looks like. You know, the repeated cyclical episodes of depression, of mania, but in children and adolescents, no one seemed to know exactly what that looked like. And there was a lot of confusion about it. And some people way overdiagnosed, some people way underdiagnosed. So I thought it would be a good chance to learn more about the issues and to help some kids.
Yeah, it sounds like you had some sense that you wanted to go that direction early on, and it makes me, if it's not too personal, were you depressed as an adolescent yourself?
No, no, no. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. I don't know if I was depressed with the big D depression,
Uh-huh.
but I like a lot of adolescents, I think, went through up times and down times, and I questioned that. You know, am I
Sure.
depressed? Am I going to feel better? Is this going to pass?
Hmm.
And in my case, I was lucky it did. You know, for some adolescents go through their whole lives like that, and it's a terrible way to feel.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the main focus of your book is as a guide for parents. However, for the purposes of this interview, rather than focusing on that part of it so much, I'm more interested in the phenomenon of adolescent depression and what we know and what we don't know about it. So my questions will be slanted a bit more that way, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So the first one you've already kind of touched on, which is, are the symptoms of adolescent depression different at all from those of adult depression?
I would say that they are. For some adolescents, you do see the very classic social withdrawal, inability to sleep, depressed, down mood, thoughts of suicide. But for some adolescents, you see much more agitation, aggression, kids who live on a sort of a hair trigger, who are always seemingly ready to explode at the slightest provocation. And you know, again, there's some overlap. You do see that in adults sometimes, but it's much more common to see that in children and adolescents. Plus, like I've touched on a little bit, children and adolescents are defined almost by periods of transition. They're not in a stable state. There are so many stages of change that happen in child and adolescent development that it is somewhat normative for them to have more emotional highs and lows, I would say, than most adults have. So what's
Sure.
normal and what's not normal is harder to tease apart.
And I would think that that would make the diagnosis difficult, that since it sounds like it can manifest in a variety of ways.
It does. That's what I find interesting, right? I like
Yeah.
the difficult stuff.
Oh,